Lesson 22.1, Task 3. Find measures of spread and identify outliers. An outlier is a data value that is far removed from the rest of the data. A data value X is considered to be an outlier in either of the following cases. If X is less than the first quartile, represented as Q1, and its distance from Q1 given by Q1 minus X is more than 1.5 times the inner quartile range. In other words, Q1 minus X is greater than 1.5 times the inner quartile range, or X is less than Q1 minus 1.5 times the inner quartile range. All right, X is greater than the third quartile, represented as Q3, and its distance from Q3 given by X minus Q3 is more than 1.5 times the inner quartile range. In other words, Q3 minus X is greater than 1.5 times your inner quartile range, or X is greater than, I think that's supposed to be less than, Q3 plus 1.5 times your inner quartile range. All right, so it says the attendance secretary at Seminole High School made a list of the number of student absences each day for 7 days. What are the inner quartile range and the standard deviation of this data set? Does the data set have any outliers? All right, so it gives you number of absences, 15, 12, 8, 10, 11, 26, and 9. You can see that those are not in order, so you would have to order those to find the median. You can find the mean by adding them up and dividing by the number, but let's see what it says here. So it says find the inner quartile range, order the data set to find the median. All right, so they do that and they identify the median as 11. To find Q1, you find the median of the lower 3, which is 9. And to find Q3, you find the median of the upper 3, which is 15. So your inner quartile range is the difference of Q3 minus Q1. All right, so if we want to use our calculator to do this, and we also can find the mean and the standard deviation, again, we just have to use our calculator. All right, so to clear out your data, I've showed you this before, but just to remember, if you do second plus, and you do clear all list, clear number 4, that's going to clear out everything from the last problem. So when you go to stats and edit to put a list in here, the list that we had before is now gone. So now we can enter this data. So we're going to put in 15, enter, 12, enter. You have to enter after each data entry so that it moves down. All right, so I've entered these numbers here in my table. I'm putting them all in L1. Then I'm going to go stat, calculate, 1var stats, and it's going to give me my mean. That's my average. It's going to give me my standard deviation, 5.7. It's going to give me my number in the set, which is 7. My Q1 is 9. You can see that right here. My median is 11. You can see that right here as well. Q3 is 15. And you can see that is right here. It's the same thing. And then your maximum number in the set is 26. All right, so all the information that we need can be quickly found using your calculator if you know how to enter the data. All right, so it says the mean of the data set is 13. Let's go back up. Remember, the mean is given by X with a bar over it, so we also found 13 as the mean. So it says, how do you find the mean of this data? All right, so we used our calculator, but you also could add up the 7 numbers and divide by 7. That would also give you the mean. So this one would be the mean. All right, the standard deviation, they use this very long formula to find the standard deviation. If you look, we found the standard deviation, 5.7, by using the calculator here. So again, I'm just trying to show you something that's quicker and easier, because standardized tests like the EOC and the ACT are timed, and you need to be able to find something as quick as possible. If you're using this formula, if you take statistics, you will have to learn this formula. But if you're learning this formula and you miss even one number, or you don't do something in the correct order, it's going to mess this up. In the calculator, as long as you enter those values correctly in the table, this information should be correct. Okay? All right, so it says in the calculation of the standard deviation, the first 4 steps each involved a fraction with denominator 7. You can see their denominator 7 here because they're dividing by the number in the set, which there's 7 numbers in the set. So the 7 represents the number of data values. 7 is the number of data values. All right, the standard deviation is about 5.7. That's the same thing as we found too. And it says identify any outliers. All right, so Q1 minus 1.5 times my interquartile range. So it'd be 9 minus 1.5 times 6. So that equals 0. And then Q3 plus 1.5 times your interquartile range would be 15 plus 1.5 times 6, and that gives you 24. So if you look up here above, Q1 was 9, Q3 was 15. So these two numbers here, Q1 and Q3, 9 and 15 come from that. And then the formula said 1.5 times your interquartile range. And if we look, the interquartile range was 15 minus 9, which is 6. So they're just taking the numbers that we found earlier to identify your outliers. All right, so it says, so 26 is an outlier in the data set. So everything between 0 and 24 would not be considered an outlier. So if you look up here on the original data set, 15, 12, 8, 10, 11, 26, 9, 26 is the only number that falls outside of the 0 and the 24. So that's why the 26 is considered an outlier. All right, that's all for task 3. If you have any questions, let me know. Lesson 22.1, task 4, choose appropriate statistics. Although the mean and standard deviation are commonly used statistics, they can be greatly influenced by outliers. Therefore, the mean and standard deviation are best used when describing a data set with no outliers. The median and the interquartile range are best used when the data set has one or more outliers. All right, the school's basketball coach records the number of assists for 3 players on the team. What are the appropriate statistics to use when describing each player's numbers of assists? All right, so we have 3 players here. Tanya, Celia, and Bettina. I think that's correct. If I pronounce those wrong, I'm sorry. All right, so it says find measures of centers of spread for each data set. So you can see they took the numbers here and they've already calculated the mean, the standard deviation, the median, Q1 and Q3, and the interquartile range, which is Q3 minus Q1. All right, so they've done that for each of the 3 players using this list of data. So again, we could use our calculator, enter this in, and do 1 var stat, and we could also have all of this information very quickly. All right, so it says for each girl, compare the mean and the median of their data set. For which data set is the mean closer to the median than either quartile? All right, so compare the mean and the median. So we've got 9 and 7.5. And here we've got 9.5 and 6. So this lies close. The interquartile range is very close here. We've got a mean of 7.5, a median of 7.5. So those are exactly the same. And the interquartile range is 8.5 to 6.5. So this falls right in the center of your interquartile range. Here we have 7.375. A median of 7, and our interquartile range is 8.5 minus 6. So again, this falls close to the center of our interquartile range. So it says for each girl, compare the mean and the median of their data set. For which data sets is the mean closer to the median? Okay, so that would be for Celia and Bettina. Those are close. Their mean and median are close. All right, so it says identify any data set that has an outlier. Find Q1 minus 1.5 times the interquartile range and Q3 plus 1.5 times the interquartile range for each data set to determine outliers. All right, so we're going to start with Tanya. And for Tanya, Q1, you can see is 6. She was the first girl here. Q1 is 6, so they're pulling the numbers straight from the data above. So 6 minus 1.5 times the interquartile range. Again, her interquartile range right here was 3.5. So that's given information. All right, so that is calculated to be 0.75. Do the same thing with Q3 plus 1.5 times the interquartile range is 14.75. So if you look at 0.75 and 14.75, we're looking for any outliers. So if you go up here, 20 falls outside of that interquartile range. So that's where they said the value of 20 is an outlier because it falls outside of the 0.75 and the 14.75. All right, Celia, 6.5 minus 1.5 times 2. Again, her information is going to come from right here. It's her Q1. And then her interquartile range was 2. So 6.5 minus 1.5 times 2 equals 3.5. And then we're going to do the same thing with her Q3 plus 1.5 times her interquartile range, which is 11.5. So 3.5 to 11.5. You can see that all her data points fall within that range. So it says this data set does not have any outliers. Do the same thing with Bettina. Do her values the same way. So we're going to do 2.25, 12.25. And you can see that all of her data points fall within that set of data. So it says that this data set does not have an outlier. So choose the appropriate statistics for each data set. To describe Tanya's assist per game, use the median and interquartile range. Both Selena's and Bettina's assist per game can be described by either the mean and standard deviation or the median and interquartile range. So Celia's and Bettina's data sets can be described by the mean and the standard deviation because they each have no outliers. All right, that's all for task 4. If you have any questions, I think that's all. Yes, that's all for task 4. If you have any questions,